And joining me now from London is former CIA officer and now international security analyst Robert Ayers. Mr Ayers, how substantial do you think the holes are around cargo flights and around cargo on passenger flights?
Well, there are two different levels of security with regard to cargo. When we're talking about the baggage that you take, for example, when you travel, every bag is screened. When we're talking about cargo, there are different rules for cargo that goes on a civilian aircraft and cargo that goes on a cargo carrier. Civilian aircraft going to the United States require the cargo to be screened approximately 60–70% of the time. Cargo going on a cargo carrier is not subject to the mandate of screening. In many cases, there are relationships established between the cargo aircraft carrier and the person who's doing the shipping. If, for example, the shipping is coming from a reputable business, say an auto parts manufacturing business, because he is a trusted shipper, there's no checks whatsoever made on the stuff that goes into the cargo aircraft.
So do you think that's a problem, or do you agree with the chief of Ryanair that we just heard in that story, who basically said, look, the system worked, nothing happened, let's not overreact?
Well, Mr. Leigh is known for making statements that are inflammatory. Of course there's a problem. It's self-evident. We had two explosive devices traveling around Europe and the Mideast on passenger aircraft, undetected. That is a serious problem, and no amount of complaining about security safeguards at airports for people that are trying to take bottled water on an airplane changes the fact that we had a dangerous situation.
How is it that the security around cargo hasn't been tightened up post 9/11 in the same way that security around passenger flights has been? Do you agree that it's a cost issue?
Well, there's several factors involved. One, of course, is cost. The other is simply the amount of time that would be introduced to run the checks, assuming you'd spent all the money necessary to do it. Cargo that goes onto a cargo aircraft, in many cases, is palletized. It's put in very large packages. It's put in containers. And to screen those for security purposes, you'd have to unpack it and run it through, for example, an X-ray machine. But as we know now, the explosive PETN is not discernible on X-rays. That means we're probably going to have to consider using some form of chemical detection that is able to detect low volatility compounds, and that's not in existence yet.
Tell us a little bit more about PETN. What exactly is it and how does it work?
Well, it's a very high brisonance. Brisonance means it explodes very quickly. It's a very, very powerful explosive. It's also a very stable explosive. The military uses a lot of it because you can't make it explode by dropping it or hitting it with a hammer. You need to use another type of explosive that triggers the detonation in the PETN. PETN is like a plastic explosive. You can make it malleable. You can roll it into balls. You can mold it and put it in places. The only problem then is you just have to detonate it.
And the stability that you mentioned has actually been a problem for terrorists trying to use this chemical to detonate. They haven't been able to make it go off in a couple of cases.
Well, that's a different type of explosive. You're talking about some of the attempts to make explosives by mixing liquids and things and making homemade explosives. Professionals that know how to make PETN, it will go off, and it will go off every time. It's not difficult.
What is the value for terrorists in targeting a cargo plane as opposed to a passenger jet? Would it have the same impact that a terrorist attack that killed a lot of people would have?
Well, first of all, we have to recognize that there's no such thing as a pure passenger aircraft, because all passenger aircraft do carry some amount of cargo in their holds. If they have extra space, they put cargo in it. The advantages to attacking a cargo aircraft, it depends on what the objective is. If the objective, as may have been the case in this most recent bombing incident, is to bring a plane down over a major population center like Chicago, it makes little difference whether the plane has passengers on it or cargo on it if it lands in the center of Chicago.
There are suggestions that an al-qaeda affiliate in Yemen might be responsible for this. Tell us more about terrorist activity in Yemen.
Well, as the pressure on al-qaeda in the Pakistan-Afghanistan border has continued to increase over the last several years, al-qaeda has sought safer places to operate from. They've sought sanctuaries. And Yemen is a country that is currently in turmoil. It is a country that is fighting amongst itself. It is a country in which it is rapidly going broke. It is a country in which they are fighting insurrectionists. And in this vacuum of little government control, al-Qaeda has moved in, and they've set up a base in Yemen. And in that base, they're able to, with safety, do exercise operational planning, logistics preparation, training, and use that place as a point of departure to go off and conduct their terrorist activity. It's a safe haven. It's like Afghanistan was prior to the invasion.
And are the Yemeni authorities attempting to do anything about that, or the way you've described the country, it sounds like they're fairly impotent?
Well, the Yemeni authorities cannot exert control over all of Yemen. We have to be a little doubtful when the Yemeni authorities say they're going to bring pressure to bear on al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, whether they have the capabilities to do that or not. It's fairly clearly recognized that the government of Yemen is one of the most corrupt governments in the entire Eastern world. It's very, very corrupt. It's not efficient. It is more interested in feathering their own pockets than actually promoting the health and safety and well-being of their population.
You say that Yemen is like Afghanistan was. Are the US and its allies doing anything about Yemen?
Well, we've seen several instances where the United States has supplied the government of Yemen with equipment. The Saudis are very, very big supporters of the government of Yemen. The government of Yemen is primarily Sunni. The northern part of Yemen, where the insurrectionists are and the revolutionaries are and the ones that want to go off on their own, are primarily Shia. And the expectation is that the Shia group in Yemen is backed by Iran.
You bring up Saudi Arabia. I read that the tip-off in this plot came from Saudi intelligence. So how does that work? Is Saudi Arabia doing more work in counter-terrorism? How have they been involved in this?
Well, Saudi Arabia is always very interested in counterterrorism because the Saudi royal family is concerned about their own stability on the throne. So they see terrorism, especially Shia-backed terrorism, as a direct threat to their organization and their government. What we saw here in this most recent event is either very good or very bad, or most likely a combination of both. It does appear that the Saudis were the originating source of information about these two explosive devices that have been located. And the Saudis, at least as of this morning, are reported to have told the Germans about that. The Germans then told the Americans, and the Americans then told the British. Based on that tip, which is reported to have included not simply information that there's a bomb on this airplane, but it also included information about the tracking numbers of the packages themselves. Now, the British went and searched the aircraft when it landed in East Midlands Airport. They put a cordon around it. They searched it. They searched the package that was supposedly had a bomb in it and didn't find it. And they then took the cordon down, reopened the airport, and then when the bomb in Dubai was identified, the British went back and searched again and took another look at the same package and discovered there was a bomb in it after all. So what we have is a situation whereby, let's look at a terrorist plot. Terrorism typically goes through 4 phases. The first phase is the idea. Someone has an idea to do something. The second phase is planning to actually conduct the operation. The third phase is preparation, building the bombs, getting the fake passports, whatever you may need to do the operation itself. The fourth phase is execution. The objective of the intelligence community is to identify a plot when it's in the planning or preparation phase, because no one ever wants to have a terrorist plot enter the execution phase, because once it does that, people can die. Well, this plot was discovered well into the execution phase. Bombs were already on aircraft, bouncing around Europe, bouncing around the Mideast, passenger aircraft with people on them. So in this case, the intelligence, although the Saudis did provide a tip, it came far too late to, with assuredness, prevent people from possibly being killed.
So given all of that, how should Western nations then respond to this incident?
Well, it's going to be a very, very interesting response. We can with great confidence, ensure there's going to be more security checks applied to cargo that's going into either cargo or passenger aircraft. There's going to be more improved technology that will allow the cargo to be subjected to some sort of security screening, whether that be x-rays, whether it be chemical detection, whether it be thermal, whatever it may be. There will be a suite of technology brought in. The intelligence operations will continue to focus on this area. There's not much more they can do now than what they're already doing, but they will continue that. There will probably be mechanisms put in place to ensure that there's greater and quicker communication amongst people involved in responding to terrorism. But ultimately, like any large complex system, it's going to only be as secure as its weakest link. The British screen most of the cargo that goes out of the UK.
I just wanted to ask one final. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to ask one final question. What is your opinion as a security expert of the WikiLeaks organisation, if we can change subjects? How would you describe the security implications of their document releases?
I think they're putting people at risk. They're putting people in the countries of Iraq and Afghanistan at risk. They're also compromising the safety of military personnel. They're a bunch of amateurs that is releasing a great deal of information that a trained intelligence officer can review and assemble information that will tell them things about who's collaborating with the coalition or allied forces, how do military operations work. For example, if someone calls in a helicopter gunship to provide fire support and it takes 20 minutes for that helicopter to arrive on station, and you're able to construct that information from reading all of these things that have been released, the insurgents that are fighting the Allied forces know that from the time they engage, they have 20 minutes, this is just an example, they have 20 minutes before a helicopter gunship would appear on site. So for 15 minutes they can engage freely, and then if they leave at 15 minutes, they won't be hurt. So there's a tremendous amount of information that can be gained from this, and it's all useful and helpful to the insurgents.
Robert Ayers, thank you for your time this evening.
You're welcome.